What's good, fam? Welcome to another Gelli Printing video. And I don't know if you can tell, but to my right is a stencil sheet. This week we will be making six stencils. 6 unique stencils. 6 very specific and unique stencils. And to start us off, we are going to need to cut this 12 by 12 stencil sheet into 6 squares. You got it right, 6 squares. So I started off by cutting the stencil sheet in 2, and now I'm folding each of the halves of the stencil sheet around about into 3s. Does not have to be exact. I mean, look at me. This time, I'm not even using a ruler. And y'all know I love my crispity straight lines. I do. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for both halves of the paper so that we end up with 6 stencil rectangles. Now, we are going to be making very specific stencils. Those stencils will be a person, a second person, an animal, a vehicle, a building or house, and a nature element. Some sort of nature element. I mean, leave it to your heart's desire. Now, before we can just cut up our stencils, I highly suggest you can freehand it if you want to. If you are so bold and so sure of yourself, go ahead, freehand it. I ain't. So I'm not freehanding it. I'm gonna grab my sheet of paper and I'm going to cut it into 4ths. Just like when we made our borders and our stencils before, we can use the opposite sides of the paper because that's just like our rough draft paper for our design. We'll be tracing the design onto the stencil. So it doesn't matter if you use both sides. So I'm cutting my paper into 4s. They match about the size of the rectangles that we'll be making our stencils with. And I'm going to start off by writing each of the things I need to make stencils of. And then I will go ahead and draw them. So we'll start off with person 1. Now you can draw in as much detail or as little detail as you want. But remember, because it is a stencil, it will only be the outline of whatever it is that you draw. So I'm going to do it both ways for y'all so y'all can see how even if I put all this detail in, doesn't mean it's all about to show up. So these people are going to be pretty detailed. I'm talking hair, talking accessories. Like, I'm really going in. So I wanted my first person to be a big-headed person with some big old glasses. So that's what I did. And you can see I'm putting in the detail of the rims of the glasses, even though the rims of the glasses are not going to be seen in this stencil. Not these simple ones that we're doing. Next week, we'll do a little bit more detailed of a stencil with little peekaboo parts, but this week we're keeping it simple. But like I said, I was going to show y'all how a detailed drawing turns out very simple when you're just making the stencil the outline of your drawing. So here we have our first stencil design, person 1. Look at all that detail that will be pretty much immediately lost. Now person number 2, I'm also getting pretty detailed with it. Talking accessories. Gave this thing sunglasses that you will not see in the stencil. But again, doing it to show y'all that you really, for a basic stencil, you don't even gotta do all that. But sometimes drawing in the details do help you get the correct shapes that you want for the outline of your stencil. It can be harder to just do the outline of the person without all of the extra details drawn in, because you don't exactly know the proportion of everything. That it could be more difficult to guess the proportion of everything, especially when you do add accessories and how they line up with one another. So there is a benefit to drawing in detail. It's just up to you how much time you want to spend designing the basic stencil. Now we getting things simple. We are going very simple now for the rest of these stencils, focusing on the shapes themselves, because that's what the stencil will be, just a regular shape or a blob, which can become detailed as you add to the print. If you pull it and then you go in with markers or Posca paint pens and stuff, you can add details to these shapes that you created that you know what the shapes are supposed to represent, so you can add on to them accordingly. Next up, we have the car, our vehicle. A little detailed, just because I couldn't help myself. But realistically, them handles ain't gonna show up. Them handles is not about to be detailed in this stencil at all, because it falls within the outline. Next up, we've got an animal, and I have chosen an owl. We're going pretty basic with it. Hopefully, people can even tell it's an owl just from the silhouette from the stencil. But if not, add a little bit of detail on top of the print pull. Boom, there you go. You know it's an owl. And then our last thing is our nature element. I decided to do some fun trees. Like, there are no trees that look like this. If you know of trees that look like this, let me know. And I mean naturally, not groomed trees. Not trees that have been shaped to look like this, but grow out of the ground looking like this, like squares with rounded edges. Okay, we have our stencil designs, and now it is time to trace those stencil designs onto our stencil sheets. Sheets plural now, which was once singular is now plural because we cut it up. So as we've done before with stencils, with the stencil and mask that we created, we're just lining it up over the top of our design, and we're gonna go around this person that I drew, throwing away all the painstaking details that I put in to the design. We just going around all of it. They don't even exist. They are irrelevant. And honestly, that makes this process of making the stencil, putting the actual design on the stencil sheet, a lot easier. But it also makes you reflect on the time you spent coming up with all the details in the design. And you use that to inform how you move later. Look at that. Look at that big old apple head looking stencil. Does it look like glasses? Not to me. Look like an apple head. And so we're gonna go in and trace the rest of the stencil designs. They should go pretty quickly because when you're outlining something, it goes really, really quickly, especially because it's an already drawn design. So I'm not thinking it up on the spot anymore, which ultimately takes more time when you're designing it. Bye-bye handles. Hello, what hopefully can be recognized as a car. Now we've got all our stencils traced. The designs are here. And now it is time to cut them up. I'm going through and I'm slicing the middle of the stencil so I can go around and cut out all the innards that don't matter anymore. They are irrelevant. And as I'm cutting, to make it easier, sometimes you don't even follow exactly the lines. Instead, you cut out simple shapes first and then you go into the detailed parts. It can make it a lot easier in the cutting out process. Those first ones weren't super difficult, but the last ones with the people, a little bit. Took me a little bit of time. So I just went ahead and skipped ahead. Okay, now we have all of our stencils. And guess what? We are ready to pull some prints. Got our clean, pristine Gelli Plate. And I've got my stencils at the ready, just grabbing the rest of my supplies, my Brayers, trying to figure out which stencil I'm going to do first, and I'm just going to lay that right in the middle of the Gelli Plate. I have chosen to do the owl first. And for the owl, I've got this brown paint that I hadn't used before, but I mean, look at me, I'm brown, so I love a good brown. Since these stencils aren't huge, don't cover the whole surface of the Gelli Plate, it's fine to just use my smaller brayer, just being intentional to make sure that I get all of the opening of the stencil. And if that means overlapping onto the stencil, that's fine. You do what you gotta do. Just make sure you get that whole stencil hole filled in. Because I'm just swatching all of these stencils, I'm using half of the sheet of paper. That way, I'm not just using up trees that have been turned into paper. So we've got our little owl that, probably doesn't look like an owl. Because I mean, anatomically, that's not the shape of an owl. Well, we took a little creative license. And like I said, if we fill those in, we could really make it look like an owl. And for this car, we are using this light skin turquoise. Yeah, we're really out here continuing to give it a chance. I love those crispy lines when you pull up the stencil and you see that the shape is all crispity clean. Look at that, we've got our car. There was a little brown left behind from the owl, but that's okay because our car, it's carring. Just, a zoomity zoom, a zoom, zoom, zoom. Because I don't want just all of the paint to just stay behind and show up on the other stencils. Now I'm going to be cleaning in between. That way we can get like a nice clean swatch of the shape of the stencil we're pulling. I'm going to use this leafy green that I love so much. This is for the trees, and actually we're getting a little fancy because we're doing 2 colors in one. Yeah, we're bold. We out ya. We're using the green and the brown because trees typically consist of green and brown. And I'm using this little brayer, just blend it a little. Right in the middle. We're gonna see how this turns out. I'm kind of excited. Elbow grease, with the elbow grease. Ooh, look at that. Very painterly, very abstract, very cool. It's time for the cityscape stencil. We bumping it up a level, y'all. We're moving on up. We're using 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 colors. Black for the bottom, light blue for the middle, and a little bit of white tight for the top. It's hard to regulate how much paint I'm putting out because this is way more that's needed for this little stencil, but that's okay. And this I'm using the bigger brayer for because I want the colors to stay in place since there's 3, not 2. Look at those crispy edges, y'all. Look at all that paint left behind. But I think that was pretty cool. I didn't consider the fact that since it's on white paper, probably wouldn't see the white, but it was cool to try. Step up our game. Be unique. Unique? Now, the last ones are the people. Person 1 and person 2 that we drew. Going in with person 2, we are using this yellow that I love so much. Look at that. It's backwards because I didn't flip the stencil the right way. But you can really see the shape. You see the shape of what I was going for. You know, a little lean action, a little lean. Apple head, we are using this pretty pink. We're rolling that out. And I can already see that some of the details are lost, like between the head and the arm, but we're doing what we can. And look at that, we got old apple head and old backwards suave with the middle part. I like how these turned out, to be honest. And it would be really fun to draw over these. But right now, we're gonna review all the prints we made. We've got our owl and our car of Roomity Vroom Vroom. Because there was so much paint in such a concentrated spot, the way the paint gathered was kind of different. And it can especially be seen on the owl. It's just so thick. And then we got our trees, which might be my favorite because I like that blend between the brown and the green. I feel like it really speaks to it being a tree. We've got our cityscape where we lose the white at the top, but I appreciate what we were going for. And we've got person 1 and person 2, old Applehead and old Suavo with the middle part. You cannot forget the middle part. Yeah, we have made us 6 stencils. 6 stencils. We got into a lot today. We learned a lot. We learned a lot. I had fun. I hope you had fun. And so, until next week, bye!